They sold his songs for 10 grand and didn't even tell him what he was giving up. Tom Petty thought publishing meant sheet music, not his life's work. By the time MCA bought his label, he wasn't an artist anymore. He was inventory. So Tom Petty blew it up, filed for bankruptcy, hid the master tapes, paid for the album himself, and dared the label to sue him into dust. They tried, they lost, and Petty walked out owning everything. His music, his masters, his name. Here's how one artist turned a rigged system inside out.
Like, subscribe, thank you.
Now, the record business didn't need to break your legs. It had lawyers for that. For decades, the contract was the weapon. Artists, usually young, desperate, would walk into a label's office dreaming of platinum albums and walk out with a smile and a ticking time bomb in their hands. The deal looked good on the surface. Sign here, take the advance, cut a record. But the fine print was always a trap. That advance was not a gift, it was a loan. Every studio hour, every radio plug, every glossy photo shoot came out of it. And before a single dollar touched the artist's pocket, the label made sure to get theirs back first. Recoupment, they called it. In practice, it meant artists were the last ones paid for their own success. And of course, the deeper the artist went, the more the label owned. If the record bombed, the artist owed. If the record exploded, the label still kept most of the cash. Tour support? That came out of the advance. Marketing? That too. And the royalty rates? Brutally low. Creative accounting padded the books in the label's favor, and when the numbers didn't add up, they shrugged. Standard practice. And so even with artists with gold plaques in the wall could find themselves flat broke because in the end, the house always wins. But Tom Petty didn't walk into the music business with a lawyer. He walked in with a guitar and a dream. That was enough to get him noticed, but not enough to keep him safe. After leaving Gainesville for Los Angeles, Petty's band Mudcrutch caught the attention of Shelter Records. The label signed them, then promptly dropped the band, except for Petty. They saw something in him. What they gave him in return was a contract wrapped in bad faith. Petty signed away his publishing rights for a reported $10,000. And at the time, he didn't even understand what it meant. Publishing sounded like something to do with sheet music. Who cared? Nobody told him it was a real pipeline for long-term money. Radio spins, movie syncs, cover versions. Every time somebody made a dime off of one of his songs, that money would not go to him. It would go to somebody who never wrote a note. And so by the time he realized that the deal he signed was already too late, he handed away the golden key, his own catalog, because he didn't know any better. He wasn't alone. Labels made a business out of that kind of ignorance. Petty later said it felt like somebody had pulled a fast one on him, and they had, and they were just getting started. Tom Petty had gold records in the wall and nothing in his pocket. 2 albums in. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, You're Gonna Get It. Both certified gold, both packed with songs that would outlive the decade. Breakdown, American Girl, radio staples, jukebox lifers. But for Petty, the money was not coming in. And when he finally sat down and looked at the numbers, the truth hit really hard. It was scraps that he had gotten when he signed away his publishing. And while he was touring, writing, grinding, the people who handed him the contract were cashing in tenfold. He wasn't just underpaid, he was completely outmaneuvered. The contract had worked exactly as it was supposed to, just not for him. Tom Petty later said they were earning pennies a record, not metaphorically, literally. The label got fat, the executives got paid, and Petty, who wrote the damn songs, was asking how the hell it all worked. It didn't matter that the records were hits. The contract buried the profit. And Petty, now wise to the setup, called it what it was, a complete and total ripoff. One that started the day he mistook his publishing rights for paperwork about sheet music. So in 1979, Tom Petty woke up one morning and found out he had been sold, not consulted, or asked, actually sold. Shelter Records, his label for better or worse, got swept up in a corporate reshuffle when ABC Records, which distributed Shelter, was acquired by MCA. And along with the desks, the filing cabinets, the coffee machines, they transferred Tom Petty, just part of the package. Chattel, a name on the sheet. No phone call or heads up. He found out about it in the newspaper. And Tom Petty did not take it well. He said it felt like being bought and sold like a piece of meat. Or worse, like groceries or frozen pork. No agency or dignity. Just product being moved from one shelf to another. He'd specifically asked for a clause in his Shelter contract requiring consultation before any such transfer. The clause was ignored. Didn't matter what was in writing. MCA already had what it wanted. Petty had spent years working his way out of one crooked deal only to be told that he now belonged to a bigger machine. And this time, it wasn't just about money. It was actually about principle. He wasn't going to sit still while some suit in a skyscraper told him who to report to. And he said, it just really pissed me off. And so forget rebellion mode, this was actual survival mode at this point. And Tom Petty was backed into a corner and he decided he was going to throw a punch. By 1979, his third album, Damn the Torpedoes, was nearly finished and anticipation was sky high. But instead of handing it over, he slammed the brakes. He wasn't giving MCA a single note until they sat down and fixed the mess. No more garbage contracts, no more siphon publishing. Petty had 2 gold records behind him and he wasn't about to keep getting robbed. MCA did not blink. They came at him hard. Lawsuits, breach of contract, the whole 9 yards. Petty said that the label was trying to put him in his place, using a wall of lawyers to bury him. And they nearly did. His team, manager Tony Dimitriades and Elliot Roberts, warned him that he was shooting himself in the foot. MCA was a total monster. They had the money, the muscle, and zero intention of playing it fair. But Petty wouldn't roll over. He, for lack of a better pun, wouldn't back down. Instead, he went nuclear. He refused to hand over Damn the Torpedoes and decided to fund the recording himself. And that, folks, meant debt. A lot of it. Almost $500,000. Money he did not have. He scraped it together playing tiny club gigs, sometimes paying for studio time one day at a time, cash in hand. It was a brutal gamble. No label, legal backing, and a pile of bills. But Petty was not bluffing. He was betting everything because the alternative was being owned again. So really, at this point, he was gambling with his entire future. By choosing to self-finance the album, he put everything on the line. $500,000 in recording costs, no label support, no safety net, and it nearly broke him. He was so deep in debt, the band started hiding their master tapes after every session, afraid a bankruptcy judge would swoop in and seize them like a used couch or a busted van. And it wasn't paranoia, it was being smart. Band members were selling gear just to make rent. Mike Campbell, the Heartbreakers' secret weapon, had to pawn his vintage 63 Strat just to be able to stay afloat. Petty wasn't just desperate, he was smart. His legal team dug through the bankruptcy code and found the back door. Executory contracts. A recording contract, by definition, required both parties to keep performing. That meant it could be rejected in bankruptcy court. And so Petty filed. He declared bankruptcy, not because he was out of money, but because it gave him legal leverage. If the court voided his contracts, he'd be free. No more MCA, no more shelter, no more being traded like property. And he later said it to himself. If you're bankrupt, all contracts are void. And that was a plan, and it worked. On paper, Tom Petty was broke. $500,000 in debt, barely $50,000 in assets. That's what the bankruptcy filing said. Whether those numbers were cooked or not didn't matter in the moment, until somebody proved otherwise. The court had to take them at face value, and that bought him time. Strategic chaos. The risk? Everything. And while Petty later admitted the bankruptcy might have been a sham in some ways, it didn't feel like a bluff when the lawyers started circling. It felt like drowning, but that was the whole point. Petty's move wasn't just legal, it was more on the psychological side of things. He wanted to actually scare the industry, show them that the little guy wasn't going down quietly, and that if there was a come after him, he'd torch the whole thing. And it worked. For all the posturing, the legal machine blinked, because underneath the smoke and numbers, there is one undeniable truth. Petty wasn't just another artist begging for a raise, he was ready for war. So while lawyers filed motions and the label plotted retaliation, Tom Petty was running this covert operation. The master tapes for Damn the Torpedoes, his lifeline, and his biggest bargaining chip, were now liabilities. Under the old contract, they technically belonged to the label, which meant the court could seize them at any moment. And so Petty vanished them. Every day, his roadie, Alan Bugs Weedle, would take the tapes and move them. New hiding spot, new cover identity. Petty told him to strip off any labels with his name and replace them with Morgan Lane, a fake company name, a ghost entity. And even Petty didn't know where the tapes went. The less he knew, the safer they were. And again, it worked. The tapes were never found. Meanwhile, producer Jimmy Iovine was in the trenches as well, begging MCA for the studio funds behind Petty's back, slipping cash into the project just to keep it afloat. He treated the tapes like state secrets, physically relocating them when necessary, dodging seizure like a Cold War courier smuggling microfilm. And the band, well, they were still starving, some of them living on $50 a week. Instruments getting pawned, side gigs becoming lifelines, but none of them walked. They were making the best album of their lives and hiding it like it was contraband, because in a way it was. And lo and behold, Tom Petty won. His bankruptcy stunt sent shockwaves through MCA. Executives panicked. This wasn't just one artist throwing a tantrum, it was a loaded blueprint. If Petty pulled it off, others could follow. And suddenly the whole power structure, contracts, advances, lifetime debt looked vulnerable. One internal memo reportedly called it a blueprint for artist rebellion, a threat that could trigger a mass exodus of talent. And Petty wasn't bluffing, and MCA knew it. He had them over a barrel. And after months of legal trench warfare, the label finally cracked. They caved. They tore up the old contract and handed Petty a brand new deal, multi-million-dollar advance, $3 million guaranteed, and a label built just for him, Backstreet Records. But more than the money, Petty got back what mattered most, his publishing rights. The songs were now his again. Damn the Torpedoes dropped soon after, named after the fight it took to make it exist, and it went triple platinum. The gamble paid off. The band became stars. Fresh off the fight that nearly bankrupted him, Tom Petty found himself staring down MCA again, this time over a single dollar. In 1981, MCA tried to price his new album, Hard Promises, at $9.98, $1 more than the standard at the time, $8.98. It was part of a quiet experiment the label was calling superstar pricing. In plain English, if your name was big enough, the fans would pay extra. Petty was not having any of it. He didn't care that the new label was technically his own imprint under MCA. He didn't care about the extra profits. He saw what the label was testing, and he saw where all this crap was going. First it's $9.98, then it's $12, then $20, and he told the label straight up, this is not about marketing, this is about people, the fans, the ones scraping together cash to buy music in the first place. MCA, of course, thought it was business. Petty thought it was more of a betrayal, and he refused to let the album drop at that price. At one point, he even floated the idea of calling the record $8.98 just to make his point. He told the press, the fans, anybody who would listen, that the people at the label just couldn't see the reality of what it's like on the street. Because for him, rock and roll wasn't supposed to be a luxury item, it was supposed to belong to everybody. And Tom Petty took this public. When MCA tried to push the $9.98 price tag on Hard Promises, Petty threatened to shelve the entire album. No release, no compromise, or if it did come out, he'd slap a new title on the front, the one that was just mentioned. And of course, he doubled down on that philosophy that when there's a communications breakdown, he said artists had two choices, get steamrolled or stand up. And fans loved it. The word spread fast. Petty wasn't just fighting for himself, he was actually fighting for them too. No corporate spin or marketing gloss, just a rock star drawing a line in the sand, and the pressure worked. The fans rallied, media took notice, and MCA blinked again. Hard Promises hit shelves at the standard price. Petty didn't just win, he turned a contract dispute into a grassroots victory, $1 at a time. And if the industry thought Petty was done, they didn't know him. Hard Promises was just another round. For the rest of his life, he stayed loud, kept calling out label greed, rigged deals, and the machinery designed to strip artists of control. Petty survived the system, and he also exposed it. And once he saw it for what it was, he never stopped telling people the truth about it. And by 2002, Tom Petty wasn't just criticizing the industry, he was naming names. The Last DJ wasn't subtle. It was a full frontal assault on the suits who spent decades gutting the soul of music. Title track called out a world where DJs no longer choose the songs, where everything was bought, sold, pre-approved. Some radio stations banned it outright, two on the nose. And then came Joe, a scathing portrait of a record exec grinning through the lines, "You get to be famous, I get to be rich." No metaphor or guesswork. The song Money Becomes King twisted the knife even deeper. It wasn't just that the industry had changed, it was that it had stopped pretending to care. Everything was monetized, packaged, sterilized, and Petty, who'd been watching it happen for 30 years. He could have stayed quiet, cashed his checks, played the hits, but that was never the game in the first place. Petty didn't just survive the machine, he kept spitting in its gears, right on up until the very end. Moral of the story, if you're going to chain up an artist, make damn sure they don't find the key. Sadly, these days that key is getting harder and harder for artists to find, but at least there is some hope, looking back on stories like this anyhow. To my subscribers, thank you. You freaking rock. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe, rip that $8.98 price tag off the subscribe button because it is free. Give it a nice poke. Turn around and hit the like button as well because that's also free. Join the family. I want to thank you so much for watching.